Nearly 1 week after the midterm elections, all eyes are on the Florida results. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. Well, President Trump, who just returned from Paris, is now setting his sights on the bitter battle over the election recounts in the Sunshine State. The Republican candidates for Senate and governor are crying foul over the vote recount and accuse Democrats of voter fraud. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn. Ben?
Well, Jenna, we're talking about more than 8 million votes being recounted as I speak. President Trump called the Florida ballots massively infected and demanded an end to the recount. The commander-in-chief tweeted the Florida election should be called in favor of Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis, in that large numbers of new ballots showed up out of nowhere and many ballots are missing or forged. An honest vote count is no longer possible. Ballots massively infected must go with election night. Now, election night had both Scott and DeSantis ahead and declared the victor, but razor-thin margins in the Senate and gubernatorial races triggered a recount over the weekend. My colleague, Amber Strong, has the details.
In the Sunshine State, the battle for the ballot is getting downright ugly.
Bill Nelson's a sore loser. He's been in politics way too long, 42 years. He just won't give up.
The state is in the midst of a bitter recount, including the races to decide who heads to the governor's mansion and who resides in the Senate. Sunday, Florida's Secretary of State announced a recount, which triggered automatically when the GOP leads dropped to below half of 1%. On election eve, GOP candidates Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis seemed destined for victory, but an onslaught of late votes from Broward County and Palm Beach County closed the gap. Republicans are crying foul.
They didn't report on time. We still don't understand how they went in these two counties and had a dramatic increase.
The Florida courts agreed there was improper action, charging Broward County officials failed to turn over ballot records. Democrats contend it isn't fraud, but democracy at work.
No one should stand in the way of the people of our state exercising their right to vote and to have their voice heard.
The Florida Department of State also says it has yet to receive any credible allegations of fraud. But Broward County has been plagued by accusations of political incompetence in years past. While Democrats say it isn't over until every vote is counted, Scott says he's moving forward.
We won. The citizens of the state won. I'm going to be going to D.C. and I'm going to do exactly what I did in Florida, try to change the direction of the country like we tried to change the direction of Florida.
And right now, even the recount seems to be in trouble, as some of the 67 districts fear they won't be able to complete the recount by Thursday's deadline. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Like Amber reported, there are big questions if all locations will be able to make that Thursday timeframe. A Florida Department of State rep says if a county does not submit its results by the deadline, then the results on file at the time appears will take the place. So bottom line, it appears one way or another by the end of the week, this will all be wrapped up. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Well, this is no doubt one of the most contested midterms in Florida history. Ken Blackwell is a former politician, author, and conservative activist with the Family Research Council, and he joins us now. Ken, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you.
So, Ken, what do you think? Do you think Democrats in Florida are manufacturing votes?
Well, I think there's enough lack of transparency. There are enough missed deadlines that it really does raise the question as to how they, in fact, found 83,000 votes after the deadline was established for them to at least give a vote count. And as a consequence, where you have suspicion and a past practice of gross mismanagement, that raises the prospect that everything is not being played within the lines of correct administration of elections.
Yeah, you mentioned Brenda Snipes, and it looks like her days as the Broward County election supervisor are limited. There's just a laundry list of issues plaguing her office, including counting unlawful votes, destroying ballots, and other things. Marco Rubio says she needs to be removed from office. What do you think, Ken? Do you agree?
Well, I agree, and I understand that Governor Rick Scott was hesitant to do that because she had been there a while. she was elected by the electors in her district, and he in fact thought that she would get on the straight and narrow, and that was a mistake. She has oversaw yet another really botched election, and that really does destroy public confidence in the results when there's this comedy of errors.
Yeah. Snipes' attorney, she says that she is being unfairly attacked and calls this political gamemanship at its best. Your thoughts?
Well, it's not political gamesmanship. She, on her own admission, has in fact destroyed ballots before they were scheduled to be rightfully destroyed, erasing the original ballot so that you erased the possibility of going back and checking the accuracy of the tally with a paper ballot. She, in fact, has been guilty of faulty design and leaving issues off of a ballot. So it is gross incompetence, or at worst, it's fraud. And as long as you start to keep, processes and the counting in the darkness, you raise the suspicion that there's hanky-panky going on. And she, again, in this case, has kept campaign officials from overseeing and eyeballing the process. Yep. So what are we to think when all of a sudden 83,000 votes materialize?
Yeah, the optics certainly do not look good. Ken, what do you think needs to happen so that this doesn't happen again in Florida or any other state?
Well, look, the state election officials vary in their prescriptions of how you run and manage successful campaigns. And I don't think all of Florida's election officials should be painted with the same brush as Broward County and Palm Beach counties. These are two counties that have chronic histories of chronic mismanagement and I think a disconnect from elections as they should be properly run. So I think that there needs to be some personnel changes. But again, that's up to those state officials. There needs to be a consistency, and people need to hit the deadlines. Again, there's a chronic pattern of not hitting the deadlines, a chronic pattern of actually pushing people away from a very transparent process. And as a consequence, there is a lack of credibility and a real fear that hanky-panky is going on.
Ken Blackwell, always good to see you. Thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, and Florida isn't the only state where some elections have still yet to be decided. Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now for more. Abigail, what's the situation down in Arizona?
Well, in Arizona, the Senate race is still too close to call. This is largely due to the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of early voters in Arizona, and about 300,000 of those early voting ballots were not turned in until Election Day. And these ballots then go through a verification process that's rather timely. Once they've been through that, then they make sure that people did not vote twice, once early and on Election Day. So that's the main reason we're seeing this delay. Now, originally, they were just looking at the uncounted early ballots in certain counties, but Martha McSally's campaign pushed for them to really count all of these early voter ballots in all of the counties, where especially the rural counties where she's seeing her numbers go up. And so both candidates have put out statements saying that they feel like by the end of this, they will be victorious, but it is a rather lengthy process, but all the votes must be tallied by 5 p.m. on Wednesday. So hopefully by then we will know who the next senator in Arizona will be.
Yeah, and right now it looks like Democrat Kyrsten Sinema is slightly up. Abigail, what about the Georgia governor's race?
Well, in Georgia, the Republican candidate Brian Kemp has declared victory over his Democratic opponent Stacey Abrams. Kemp won by about 60,000 votes, but there are about 30,000 votes that were not counted in Georgia. So Abrams argues that if 19,000 of those 13,000 uncounted votes are for her, then she has enough votes to call for a recount. But Kemp has declared victory, and he expects to see that election certified on Wednesday.
Now, and with a soon-to-be divided Congress, Abigail, what are we looking at in terms of the investigation Democrats in the House might start taking up?
Yes. Well, the number one thing House Democrats want to look at is President Trump's appointment of Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. House Democrats say he will be the first person that they summon or subpoena to the Capitol come January. And then another thing they want to look at is President Trump himself regarding hush payments made to two women during the 2016 campaign that claimed that they had affairs with President Trump. They want to know what the president's involvement was with those payments. They also want to try and get their hands on President Trump's tax returns, and they want to take a closer look at President Trump's dealings with the media and if he could lawfully revoke the White House press credentials of Jim Acosta from CNN. So they will certainly be busy come January when they have the House majority.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Axios today also had a list of about 80 different things that Democrats want to investigate. All right, Abigail Robertson for us on the Hill. Thank you so much. Well, President Trump often calls the mainstream media fake news, but new polling actually suggests Americans are becoming more trusting of the mainstream media. 45% say they have a great deal or fair amount of trust in the media to report news fully, accurately, and fairly. That's up from just 2 years ago when only 32% of Americans said they felt that way. According to the Gallup poll, Democrats' trust in the mass media is at a 20-year high. Well, fallout continues from that heated exchange between the president and CNN correspondent Jim Acosta.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the and at that point.
After that heated back and forth, the White House suspended Acosta's hard pass credentials, accusing him of placing his hands on a press aide when she tried to get the microphone away from him, something both Acosta and CNN deny. There are new reports today CNN may be planning to sue the White House over the ordeal. In commentary from the journalism organization Pointer, the group is urging other reporters to use the situation as a learning experience, saying, quote, "This is in no way a defense of Trump's suspension of Acosta's White House press credentials. Rather, it's a caution to not hand your critic the stick to beat you with." Had Acosta phrased his question in a more neutral tone, he likely would have had more information for his audience to digest. David Brody joins me now for more. David, you wrote a commentary piece recently for CBNnews.com called Trump in the Age of the Correspondent. You describe a trinity in the world of journalism. What do you mean by that trinity?
Well, Jenna, there's the correspondent, the pundit, and the activism spirit, not the Holy Spirit, though the Holy Spirit much better than the activism spirit for sure. But that's the trinity. And what I mean by that, Jim Acosta is a really good example. He is a correspondent, at least in title, he's a correspondent. But as we've seen, he has morphed into activist mode as well, hence the pundit title. And then, of course, the activism spirit, talking about this caravan just in the press conference a few days ago, where he talked about how the caravan, he basically gave his opinion of what the caravan was or was not. So you put it all together, and we're in a very dangerous era right now, Jenna, of correspondents who want to play pundits as well, and it leaves the voter at times, or I should say the viewer, very, very confused.
David, why do you think things have gotten to where they are today?
Well, we're in a polarizing climate. And, you know, I remember, and Jenna, you and I have interviewed David Lane before out in California. He's that influential evangelical organizer. And he always is fond of saying this: someone's values are going to reign supreme. And I think there's no doubt in the culture we have today, and it's been going on for a long time, but it's true. Someone's values are going to reign supreme. And what we see is both sides fighting. And let's be honest, on the media side, there is some fighting going on for sure, not just against this president, but about what this president stands for. And I think in essence, Donald Trump has kind of outed many of these correspondents to the point where they are now revealing a lot of that activism spirit. And so why have we gotten to this point? Because of the culture we live in today, Jenna.
What's your response to those like Jim Acosta and others who say they are, just trying to get to the facts and the truth? They feel like it's their duty to do this.
Well, the response to Jim Acosta and others would be great. Get to the facts and the truth. But, oh, by the way, don't bring your soapbox into the briefing room. I mean, it's really that simple. Look, the other day at the White House press conference, he could have easily just asked this question about the caravan. That's what correspondents do. I know it's a novel concept in today's day and age, but correspondents are actually supposed to, here, wait for it, ask a question. But instead, he brought his soapbox, his caravan soapbox in this case, with him. And that is not at all what correspondents are supposed to do. You're either a pundit or a correspondent. You've got to choose one. Once again, it's invaluable, especially when it comes to so people can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways. So, David, one more question. What is the solution to this correspondent problem?
That's a really good question, and if I had the answer, I don't know. Maybe I'd be somewhere else. No, I won't. I wouldn't be somewhere else. It's very difficult. I would just say this. I think the power is in the hands of, in quotes, we the people. In other words, the folks out there need to understand what they're watching, what they're listening to, who's saying what. Look, Jim Acosta at this point, I think folks can pretty much come to a conclusion of where he's coming from. But there's a lot of other reporters out there. I'm not going to name names. There are a lot of other reporters that, well, you know what? What is their agenda exactly? So I think you have to be very careful, and the voter has to do its due diligence to make sure they understand what this reporter says, how they say it, and everything combined in all of that. And that's my ride. I think I got to go. But anyhow, is that they've got to make sure they understand where the source of information is coming from. And that means the age of the correspondent is alive and well. They need to be careful.
Now, David Brody on the busy streets of New York City. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Jenna.
Devastation in California. Up next, the latest on the deadly wildfires. Both northern and southern California are facing historic wildfires as the number of those killed continues to climb. 250,000 people have been evacuated. Mark Martin reports.
The fire in Northern California is known as the Camp Fire. It's left massive destruction about 100 miles north of Sacramento.
They're all around me. What do you mean? There is nothing left.
The Camp Fire has burned more than 100,000 acres and destroyed thousands of homes and buildings.
There ain't nothing to go back to. We're basically homeless right now.
Take a look at the town of Paradise, California. Burned out vehicles are on the roads and the local hospital is destroyed. Governor Jerry Brown is calling for a major disaster declaration.
This is not the new normal. This is the new abnormal. And this new abnormal will continue, certainly in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years.
President Trump urged California to improve its upkeep of forests, tweeting, "With proper forest management, we can stop the devastation constantly going on in California. Get smart." As thousands evacuated, more than 200 people remain missing. Meanwhile, the Woolsey fire in Southern California rages on, leading to mandatory evacuations for 250,000 people. That includes all of Malibu. The wildfire leveled multi-million-dollar homes.
Do not return to your homes. The evacuation zones have not been rendered clear or safe by first responders.
Some of the thousands of firefighters battling the southern fire have called it a hurricane of fire. They've already been fighting the flames for days and are preparing for the situation to get worse. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Well, Heather Sells has covered California wildfires for CBN News extensively, and she joins us now with her insight. Heather, tell us about your experience out there in California covering these fires.
Right. Well, most recently, Jenna, I was in Redding covering the Carr fire, and I can tell you that a lot of people there were really caught by surprise. You think, oh, why don't they evacuate? Why don't they get out of harm's way? But these fires are quick moving, and also because of the wind, they can change rapidly. So a lot of times people wake up and find out, oh, my goodness, I'm being evacuated. I can also tell you that a lot of people are really not knowing how to address this because there are so many causes here for these fires. There are high winds, there's dead trees, high temperatures, droughts. So there's a lot of things at play, and the state is really struggling to try and figure out what to do with all these fires.
Yeah, and some of the images we are seeing are just devastating. Heather, after a big wildfire like this, what are some of the biggest needs?
Right. I would say there's the immediate, there's the intermediate, and the long term. So immediately people need food and shelter. And then short term, they need transitional shelter. They need a place to stay while they are figuring out what their long-term needs are going to be, if they're going to rebuild their home or move to new housing. And then there's just the long-term needs. You do not get over something like your home being destroyed or possible loss of life quickly. So these communities are looking at years of recovery, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah, 250,000 people evacuated in just right now in California. It's incredible. Heather, in all of these fires, we always see the church really step up in incredible ways. What have you seen?
Yeah, that is the beautiful part of it. You see churches coming in at every level, both immediate and long term. But one of the things I found out about that I didn't know is that churches, a lot of them, at least in Redding, have trained to walk alongside people in what they call ash outs. And that is the first time that people will go back and look at their burned out home. And this is a very emotional time, a really challenging time. And so a lot of churches have chaplains trained to walk people through this process. And we saw that happening in California. And that is a really painful thing, but a beautiful thing to see the church ready to help.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Heather Sells, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Honoring our veterans, how American heroes were celebrated today at Arlington National Cemetery. November 11th is Veterans Day here in America. It's a time to celebrate the service of all members of our armed forces, past and present. Secretary of Veterans Affairs did just that in a ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery.
To the veterans represented here on both active and retired status, it is my pleasure on behalf of the President of the United States to welcome you to Arlington. I have had the privilege in my life of seeing this military world from many angles. As a dependent, as the son of a gravely wounded combat soldier, as an officer, and as a leader in the Pentagon. I have spent a lifetime watching those who have borne the battles. And I have seen it through the eyes of my elementary school classmates at Fort Sill and Fort Bragg, whose fathers did not come back from Vietnam.
Mark, time. Mark, forward. Mark, counter march. Forward. 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 Forward.
And from all of us at Faith Nation and CBN News, we would like to thank every veteran for their service and sacrifice. That's going to do it for us today. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.